Right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much, Jenny, for preparing this talk for us, and at very short notice as well. This is something we've been chatting about quite a lot and something that we're both really interested in. So I hope that the people joining us live now and those watching later will really enjoy finding out more about activism and your take on it. So over to you.
Hey. Hello everyone. So for any of you who don't know me, I'm Jenny. I'm Miss Hill from part of the library team. And as Miss Morgan just said, the presentation I'm going to give you today, I'm just going to talk a bit about activism and what that could look like in your life. So if we just go in a moment to the first slide. If we could just go on to the next slide. Okay. So your first idea of an activist might be someone who goes on protest marches, who's trying to get you to sign a petition in the street or lobbying the government. But activism doesn't start out as a political agenda. It simply starts with something you're passionate about, like a hobby. This could be anything from animals, children, movies, a sport, your profession. Hopefully this is something you will be passionate about in the future, or you are passionate about if you're on the staff listening. Basically, my point is anything you care a lot about will affect your life and your lifestyle choices. And when these lifestyle choices are something informed by activist views, that is what we call conscious activism. So living a consciously activist lifestyle. So I'll just give you an example of that on the next slide. So being an animal lover could be the first step to becoming an environmentalist. Before anyone else points it out, yes, I am trying to emotionally manipulate you with some pictures of some cute endangered animals. Not all endangered animals are this cute. They're all still worth saving. So being an animal lover could cause you to change your diet, maybe becoming a vegetarian or a vegan, or reducing different intakes in some way. It could change your shopping habits, moving you towards being more plastic free, composting, recycling. Maybe you'll choose to cycle to work or school more often instead of driving or getting the bus. Or no, get the bus instead of driving. That still helps. So these examples, among many other things, would mean that you are living a more environmentally friendly lifestyle. And that is an example of conscious activism, bringing activism into your day-to-day life. So moving on from the conscious part of activism, how could a love of animals lead to you being an activist in the more wider community? Well, this could be that you become someone who donates to a wildlife reserve, someone who does beach cleans. You might want to lobby a company to change their practices, or even become the policy writer yourself. You see, activists are the people out on the street hanging the banners and chanting, but they are also the people behind the scenes, writing the books, doing the science, sitting on the boring committees, and bringing about change in the hard bureaucratic way. So I've got another example for you now on the next slide. And this is another example of how a passion or a hobby could turn into activism. So if you are someone whose passion in life is caring for other people, for those close to you, you might discover activism through volunteering in a humanist way, or campaigning for other people's human rights. Again, with the examples I've put on the slide here, Soup Kitchens and Amnesty International. Amnesty are a big organisation who do a lot of good work around the world, but they are just one example. You can find loads of local organisations specialising in different ways and helping those in need. So if you have a look, have a bit of research, or come to one of us and we can help you research, you will find something that suits your style and your interest. So we go on to the next slide. Here are some more examples of different activist organisations that come from a place of passion or personal interest. Now you'll see some of these I've put on here. So the NRA, that's the National Rifle Association with the eagle holding guns, and the Countryside Alliance. Those are just there to illustrate a point that often comes up, that activism isn't just left wing. It's not sort of lefty ideology. Activism can come from any part of the political spectrum. Whatever your interest is, there's probably other people out there talking about it and trying to bring in change about it as well. And really, the NRA are a very successful example of activist lobbying. So some of the other organisations represented here on this slide, the BLF, they're the Peer Liberation Front. So they formed in 1995 to defend men's right to wear beards in the workplace. And if you think about the difference between someone's work aesthetic in 1995 and how varied it could look now, you can see they've actually had a lot of progress. They've done a lot of good. And We Are Cycling, they're a UK-based organisation who activists for all sorts of different cycling issues. But locally here in Portsmouth a few years ago, they ran a campaign, well, helped with the campaign, that got lots of new cycleways put in around Portsmouth city centre. So you can see how all these weird and wonderful organisations really do have effect on your day-to-day life. So if we just go on to the next slide. Now, these examples are slightly different. These are all activist or advocate organisations connected to people's careers. So some of your teachers will be part of the NUT that you can see there. The Diverse Books, they campaign for and fund more diverse children and young adult writers to get into the industry and get published. FSB probably wouldn't affect your lives yet, but you might have heard a bit about them in the news in this last year, because they are the Federation of Small Businesses, and they done a lot of work trying to support and get funding for small businesses during all the lockdown closures. We've got Doctors Without Borders on there, and Justice. If you might have come across them, they're a London, well, they were founded in London by a group of lawyers who campaign for law reforms, and they also do a lot of free of charge advocacy work for different social activists. So these examples are really just to show you how you can have activism in your career, in your work life, beyond just the idea of working for a big charity organisation. If you love your job, whatever your job is, and you find a room to improve it, as in these cases, that is workplace activism. And that is one way you can have a career of something you love and bring activism into that. So if we just go on to the next slide. Again, a different class of activism. So the fire that drives you to become an activist may be something you have no choice over at all. Your sexuality, your race, your gender, all these factors of identity can cause a group to be marginalised, and therefore have produced activists who fight for equality and celebration of their identity. Now, that is not saying you have to be part of a marginalised group to be an activist for it. Allyship is amazing. Personally, I have some awesome male friends who would class themselves as feminists, and most recently have been to some Reclaim These Streets protests with us. Me and some of my female friends. Now, I know there have already been some events and talks about some of the issues here at school, and there are some more great ones coming up. So I'm not going to dedicate too much time to talking about each of these specific organisations and issues, but I'll leave that platform open to those more qualified to myself, and instead focus on what we can do, what you personally can do in general terms. But if you do want any more information, please do just ask either myself, Miss Morgan, or any member of the library team, and we'll be happy to help you get all the information and ways that you can get involved. So if we move on to the next slide. So all of the hashtags on this slide are ones that have trended in the last year. Now, I'm sure you've all seen or even shared yourself some photos, videos, infographics with these hashtags on them. Now, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Social media has been a real asset to activism. You just have to look at the Arab Springs protests of 2010 to see where social media can really come useful. Then it was used by different groups from all over a wide area to find different rallying points and come together. And it was also used to get footage out of the country unmediated, which they couldn't do using normal journalistic techniques. Other great things these hashtags do is they help people find a community of like-minded people and reassure them that they're not alone in their opinions, because we all know how easy it can be to be drowned out on all the hate speech that there is online. And they've also made it easier than ever to share information and raise awareness. However, this is only the first step. Raising awareness is all well and good, but once people are aware, it's what you do next that will make the change. It's in the word. Activism requires you to be active in your efforts for change. So broadly speaking, how can you do this? On the next slide. So there are lots of ways that you can advocate, be an activist for a different cause, whatever your personal cause or passion is. So you could raise money. I'm sure through your years of school, you've seen many ways of doing this, from bake sales to fun runs to non-school uniform days where we donate money to different causes. You might write a letter or an email to a company or a council. This could be a direct letter. It could be an open letter, which is one that is public, available for all the public to read, calling out a company or councillor for a particular practice. You might want to engage in some type of volunteering. Again, there are so many ways to do that, both here where we live and all abroad, going abroad. You might want to do a survey about the issue and share the results, as was done in school last term with the D&I survey. You might want to create a public awareness campaign, which is where social media can come back in, as well as old style things like the posters you put up around school. Get the press involved, advocate for legislation, protest when it is needed and safe to do so. Find some like-minded people. You can either join an organisation, or if there isn't one for what you care about, form one. There will be other people out there who care just as much about you and want to see progress. Now, this bottom one, come up with a personal mission statement. This is something I really advise if you're just getting into any type of activism, because when you first become aware of a problem, it can become very easily overwhelming. You see there is so much need to change. You are one person. What can you possibly do? So coming up with a mission statement is a great way to set out a clear set of achievable goals that you want to achieve. And being able to tick those off will be a really amazing way for you to see progress and impact of what you're doing. So if we just go on to the next, further on to that, if you zero in on what's happening locally is another great way to go see an impact. So a great example of that at the moment is the Stop Aquin group right here in Portsmouth. If you're passionate about protecting the environment or supporting your local community, look them up and see if it's something you'd like to get involved with. It's so great to see results close to home. Plus, you'll get to meet some amazing elderly activists who will completely destroy any stereotypes you have of protests. Honestly, this organisation are trying to stop a new fibre optic line being built, and it's going through lots of old people's allotments. Not to stereotype people with allotments, but the people at these protests have been amazing. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide. So, lots of you have probably heard of the new police crime sentencing and courts bill coming in this year. And there's been lots of protests and discussion around that, and the Kill the Bill protests and chants that have come from it. So why are people so upset about this, and what does it have to do with activism? Well, at the moment, the police have the right to shut down or stop from taking place any protest that would cause, and this is the quote, serious public disorder, damage to property, or serious disruption to the life of a community. So they have quite a lot of rights to shut down a protest if and when it is necessary, but we also have rights that protect protesters. However, under the new Policing Act, this definition will give police the right to stop or cancel any protest which falls under the category of noisy and annoying, which is an extremely broad and purposefully vague definition. This applies to even protests of one person. So if you think of cases we've had in the last few years of people, I want to say it was climate emergency, and different people stuck themselves to different windows. It also applies to soapboxing, which is sort of an old school word for when you'd get one person standing up in a park, or like the people who stand up in Commercial Road and just talk at you. as annoying as they might be, one day we might all have something we want to talk about. And what this bill does is takes away everybody's right to protest any future bill that this or any future government might bring in, which is extremely undemocratic. But so I began by saying that activism doesn't start with politics, but with the individual. And although this part may sound very political, what is important to remember is that it is not party political. This is not a left versus right issue. Everybody's individual right to protest is under threat, no matter what it is you're protesting. I want you all to take a moment to think of an activity you love doing, whether this be a sport, barbecues in the park, freshwater swimming, anything at all. You don't have to tell anyone else what that is. It might be something you like doing in your own time. Now imagine for a moment that the government are bringing in a new act restricting your right to do this activity. Wouldn't you want the right to protest that, to have your say before an activity you love got taken away from you? Well, what we need now is more and more people to act now and protect your voice in the future in case any bill came in that would take that away from you. If you want any more information about this act or ways to get involved or any advice getting into activism in any way, just contact myself, Miss Morgan, or any of the library team, and we'd be more than happy to talk to you about your interests and different forms of activism. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really, really skillfully done of covering so much ground in such a short amount of time. Thank you. I think we're going to have to do a follow-up to this because I think there's so much more to say. But really, that was such a great overview and introduction to activism. So I really, really appreciate it. We're going to record this session, so hopefully people will continue this conversation with us. Next week at 1:05, we have Mrs. Nicholson, who's going to be talking about neurodivergence and in particular the gifts and challenges of being a highly sensitive person. So I hope everyone can join us then. Thank you so much. See you soon. Thank you.